A man who has nothing left doesn't give away his last chance at survival. That's what everyone believed. That's what made sense. But when Clayton Reed led that horse out of his barn, just as the sun touched the peaks above Durango, exhaustion carving lines into his weathered face and dirt coating his torn shirt, he didn't look like someone making a rational choice. He looked like someone who'd already made peace with the end. The two women standing at the edge of his property shouldn't have been there. One leaned heavily against the other, blood darkening the fabric around her shoulder. They didn't speak. They didn't beg. They just watched him with eyes that expected nothing, as if they'd learned long ago that hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. Clayton had spent 4 months alone on that dying ranch. 4 months since the winter killed his cattle. 4 months since he'd spoken to another living soul. And in all that time, the one thing he'd protected, the one thing he'd kept alive was that horse, his last piece of value, his only way out. But something about the silence between those women broke something in him, or maybe fixed something that had been broken for far longer. He gave them the horse. No words, no explanations, just unfastened the reins and held them out. The older woman stared at him like he'd handed her a loaded weapon. The younger one's eyes widened, confusion mixing with something close to fear. This wasn't how the world worked. Men like him didn't do things like this, not for people like them, but Clayton just nodded toward the horizon where the last light was dying and stepped back. They took the horse and they disappeared into the falling dark. What Clayton didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that someone had been watching from the ridge above, someone who'd seen everything, someone who would carry that image back to a camp where 100 warriors waited for word. And when dawn broke the next morning, the horizon changed. It filled with shapes, dozens of them, then more, moving as one, coming straight toward the ranch. Clayton stood in his doorway, watching them come, and realized he'd made a choice that couldn't be unmade. Whatever came next was already in motion. The question wasn't whether they would reach him. The question was why they were coming and what they would do when they arrived. Clayton doesn't move from the doorway. His hands hang at his sides, fingers loose but trembling. The rifle leans against the frame behind him, within reach but untouched. He'd known this moment would come. Some part of him had known it the instant he'd handed over those reins. The shapes on the horizon grow larger, taking form. Riders too many to count. They move in formation, disciplined and deliberate. The sound reaches him before he can make out individual faces, the thunder of hooves against hard earth, rhythmic and relentless. His throat tightens. 4 months of isolation. And now, this. He thinks about running, but there's nowhere to go. The ranch stretches out behind him, broken fences and dying land. The barn, where the horse had been, stands empty, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. He'd given them his only means of escape. Clayton presses his palms against the doorframe, steadying himself. The sun climbs higher, harsh and unforgiving, throwing long shadows across the property. Dust rises from the approaching riders like smoke, obscuring details. Had the younger woman survived the night? Had they made it to wherever they were going? Or had something worse happened? Something that brought this army to his door? The questions churn in his gut, mixing with something else. Not quite regret. More like resignation. He'd made a choice. Whatever follows is the cost of that choice. The riders slow as they reach the outer edge of his land. The formation shifts, spreading wider. Clayton counts 20, then 50, then stops counting. They encircle the property, moving with precision. Not a raid, not chaos. This is something organized. His chest constricts. Organized means intentional. They've come here specifically for him. One rider breaks from the formation, moving ahead of the others. The figure sits tall, wrapped in leather and fabric that catches the wind. Behind them, the mass of warriors holds position, waiting. Clayton's heart hammers against his ribs. He forces himself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. His father's voice echoes from somewhere deep. Panic gets you killed, boy. Stay present. But present means facing what's coming. The lone rider approaches the fence line and stops. For a moment, nothing happens. The warrior remains mounted, perfectly still. Then, slowly, they dismount. Clayton feels his muscles lock. Every instinct screams at him to reach for the rifle. Instead, he steps out from the doorway, moving into the open where he can be seen clearly. If this is the end, he won't meet it hiding. The warrior walks forward, crossing into the yard. The sun catches the side of their face, and Clayton's breath catches. It's the older woman, Maya. She moves differently now. The exhaustion that had weighed her down the night before is gone, replaced by something harder. She walks like someone who belongs exactly where she is. But it's her eyes that stop him cold. They aren't filled with gratitude. They aren't soft with relief. They're measuring him, calculating, weighing something he can't name. She stops 15 feet away, close enough to speak, far enough to remain cautious. Clayton waits. His throat feels like sand. Maya doesn't smile. She doesn't thank him. She just stands there studying him with an intensity that makes his skin prickle. Behind her, the mass of warriors remains motionless, watching. Finally, she speaks. Her voice carries across the space between them. He wants to see you. Not a request, a statement. Clayton swallows hard. Who? Maya's expression doesn't change. The one you gave the horse to is his daughter. You took something from him without asking. Now he'll decide what that means. The words land like stones in his chest. Behind Maya, the formation parts. A single rider emerges from the center, moving forward with deliberate slowness. The figure is broader than the others, commanding. Even from a distance, Clayton can feel the weight of authority radiating from him. Maya turns slightly, gesturing toward the approaching rider. That's Delshay, and you're about to learn what happens when you interfere with his family. Delshay moves like water across stone, smooth, inevitable, unstoppable. His horse steps carefully, hooves striking the hard ground in measured rhythm. As he draws closer, details emerge that make Clayton's pulse quicken. The man is older than he'd expected. Gray threads through black hair that falls past his shoulders. Scars mark his arms, visible even from a distance, lines that tell stories of survival. But it's his face that holds Clayton frozen, weathered, hard, completely unreadable. Clayton forces himself to stand straight. His legs feel weak, but he locks his knees. Running isn't an option. Begging won't help. Whatever judgment is coming, he'll face it standing. Delshay stops 20 feet away and dismounts in one fluid motion. He lands without sound, feet planted wide. For several seconds, he simply looks at Clayton. Not with anger, not with curiosity, with something closer to assessment, like a man examining an object whose purpose he doesn't yet understand. Clayton's mouth goes dry. He wants to speak, to explain, but the words stick in his throat. What could he possibly say? That he'd felt sorry for them? That he couldn't stand by and watch? That something in him broke when he saw that younger woman bleeding? None of it would matter, not to a father who just learned a stranger had touched his family's fate. Delshay walks forward, each step deliberate. He stops within arm's reach, close enough that Clayton can see the deep lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way his breathing remains perfectly controlled. Up close, the man is even more imposing, taller than Clayton by 2 inches, broader through the shoulders. Everything about him speaks of strength that comes from decades of necessity, not choice. You gave them the horse. Delshay's voice is low, graveled but clear. English, spoken with careful precision. Clayton nods. His voice comes out rougher than intended. Yes. Why? The question lands like a challenge. Clayton feels the weight of 100 warriors watching from behind Delshay. One wrong word, one perceived insult, and this ends badly. But lying feels worse than dying. They needed it more than I did. Delshay's eyes narrow. You knew who they were? No. You knew what giving away your last animal meant? Clayton's jaw tightens. Yes. And you did it anyway. It isn't a question. Clayton says nothing. Delshay takes another step forward, closing the distance until they're almost chest to chest. This close, Clayton can see the faint tremor in the older man's hands, not from fear or weakness, from something restrained, something held tightly under control. My daughter told me what you did. Kaya, the younger one. She would have died without that horse. They were being hunted. 3 men following them since dawn. If they'd been caught on foot, he doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. Clayton feels something shift in his chest. Is she all right? Delshay's expression flickers, just for a moment. Something like surprise crosses his features. Then it's gone, replaced by that same unreadable mask. She's alive because of you. The words should bring relief. Instead, they hang in the air like an unfinished sentence. Delshay turns slightly, glancing back toward the warriors. Then he looks at Clayton again. This time, there's something different in his gaze, something that makes Clayton's stomach drop. 3 men were tracking my daughters. They were found this morning, half a day's ride from here. Clayton waits, tension coiling in his gut. They'd been asking about a rancher. White man, living alone. They wanted to know if he'd seen 2 women. They were going to come here next. The implication hits like a fist. Those men had been headed to his ranch looking for the sisters. If Clayton had kept the horse, if he'd sent the women away on foot, they would have been caught, and he would have been questioned. Maybe worse. You didn't just save my daughters, Delshay says quietly. You made yourself a target. Behind him, the warriors shift, not threateningly, more like anticipation. Delshay steps back, creating space. His hand moves to his side, and Clayton's entire body goes rigid. But Delshay doesn't draw a weapon. Instead, he reaches into the leather pouch at his belt and pulls something out. A piece of worn fabric. No, a strip of leather, braided and old, with markings Clayton doesn't recognize. Delshay holds it out. You'll need to come with us. Clayton stares at the offered item, his mind racing. Come with you where? Delshay's expression remains unchanged. Those men had friends. More are coming. They know you helped my daughters. If you stay here, you won't survive the week. The weight of that statement settles over Clayton like frost. And if I go with you? His voice barely rises above a whisper. Delshay's eyes lock onto his. Then you live long enough to understand what you've done. Clayton has nothing to pack. The few belongings he owns, a spare shirt, a tin cup, a blanket worn thin, fit into a canvas sack that hangs light against his shoulder. He takes one last look at the ranch, at the structure that had been his for 6 years, and feels nothing. The winter had killed it long before today. 2 warriors flank him as they ride, not as guards exactly, but not as companions either. They watch him with the same careful attention someone might give a wolf brought into camp, uncertain whether it will bite or bow. The journey takes most of the day. They move through terrain Clayton knows from a distance, but has never crossed on horseback. Rocky passages that require careful navigation, dry creek beds where the earth cracks like old leather. The landscape stretches endless and unforgiving, offering no shade and no mercy. No one speaks. The silence presses against him, heavier than the heat. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the land, they crest a rise. Below, nestled against a canyon wall, lies the encampment. Dozens of shelters constructed from hide and wood, arranged in careful formation. Smoke rises from several fires. Children run between structures, their voices carrying faintly on the wind. Women work near the flames, preparing food, tending to tasks that keep communities alive. It looks nothing like what Clayton had imagined. This isn't a war camp. This is a home. They descend into the camp and activity pauses. Faces turn toward them, expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. A few elders stand near the central fire, watching with eyes that have seen too much to be easily fooled. Delshay dismounts first. He speaks in his own language, words flowing with authority. Some of the tension in the watching faces eases, but not all of it. Clayton can feel the weight of judgment, the questions being asked without voice. Who is this outsider? Why is he here? What has he done? Maya appears from one of the larger shelters, moving quickly to Delshay's side. She speaks quietly, gesturing toward a smaller structure at the edge of the camp. Delshay nods, then turns to Clayton. You'll stay there tonight. Food will be brought. Don't wander. It isn't a suggestion. Clayton follows where Maya leads, acutely aware of the eyes tracking his movement. The shelter is modest, barely tall enough to stand in, with a single opening covered by hide. Inside, a bedroll lies on the ground along with a water skin and a small pile of dried meat. Maya stops at the entrance. For the first time since they'd left his ranch, she looks at him directly. "My sister wants to see you?" Clayton's chest tightens. "Is she—" "She's recovering. The wound was deep but clean. She'll walk again." Maya's expression remains guarded. "She doesn't understand why you did it." "None of us do." Clayton has no answer to that. He barely understands it himself. Maya studies him for another moment, then speaks again, her voice lower. "The men who were tracking us weren't random hunters. They worked for someone who has reason to want our father's family dead." The words settle like ice in Clayton's gut. "Who? We don't know yet. But they're organized, well-funded, and they won't stop because 3 of their men disappeared." She pauses. "By helping us, you put yourself in their path. That's why Father brought you here. If you'd stayed at that ranch, they would have found you, and they would have made you talk before they killed you." Clayton feels his hands curl into fists. "I didn't ask for protection." "No, you didn't ask for anything. That's why you're still breathing." Maya's gaze hardens. "My father has seen many white men. Most want land. Some want gold. Others want to prove something, but you—" She shakes her head slightly. "You gave away the one thing keeping you alive, and you asked for nothing in return." That confuses him. "And what confuses your father?" He studies. Before Clayton can respond, a commotion erupts near the camp's perimeter. Voices raised in alarm. Warriors move with sudden urgency, grabbing weapons, forming defensive positions. Maya spins toward the sound, body tensing. "Stay here!" She sprints toward the disturbance, leaving Clayton alone at the shelter's entrance. Through the gaps between structures, he can see warriors gathering at the camp's edge. Someone is shouting. Words indistinct but urgent. Delshay strides toward the group, his presence commanding immediate attention. Clayton steps forward despite the order to stay. His pulse hammers in his ears. Something is wrong. He can feel it in the sudden shift of energy, the way even the children have gone silent. A warrior runs into camp, breathing hard. His clothes are torn. Dust and sweat coat his skin. He speaks rapidly to Delshay, gesturing toward the horizon. Delshay's expression darkens. He barks orders, and the camp explodes into controlled chaos. Warriors mount horses. Elders usher children into shelters. Women gather weapons of their own. Clayton catches Maya as she rushes past. "What's happening?" She jerks her arm free, eyes blazing. "They found us. A group of riders, maybe 20, heading this way." His stomach drops. "The men hunting your family?" "Worse." She looks at him with something close to accusation. "They're not just hunting us anymore. They're asking about a rancher, a white man who helped 2 women escape." The implication crashes over him like a wave. They aren't just coming for Delshay's family. They're coming for him, too. Delshay doesn't waste time with explanations. He moves through the camp, issuing commands, his voice cutting through the rising tension like a blade through fabric. Warriors respond instantly, forming defensive positions along the canyon's edge. Archers take elevated positions. Others create barriers using whatever materials are available. Carts, supply bundles, even saddles stacked strategically. Clayton stands near his assigned shelter, usefulness and helplessness warring in his chest. He isn't one of them. He has no place in their defense, but standing idle while people who'd offered him protection face danger feels wrong on a level he can't articulate. Maya reappears, moving with purpose. She thrusts a rifle into his hands, his own, taken from the ranch. "If you know how to use it, use it. If you don't, stay out of the way." Clayton checks the chamber. Still loaded. He looks at her. "I'm not hiding while others fight because of me." Something flickers in her expression, not quite respect, but acknowledgement. "Then stay close to Father. He'll tell you where to position." She moves away before he can respond. Clayton finds Delshay near the center of the defensive formation, speaking with 3 older warriors. Maps drawn in the dirt show the canyon's layout, escape routes, vulnerable points. Delshay looks up as Clayton approaches, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You know how to shoot? Well enough." Delshay gestures to a position behind a natural rock formation that offers both cover and a clear sight line toward the camp's entrance. "There. Don't fire unless I give the order. We don't know what they want yet." Clayton moves into position, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sun has nearly set, painting everything in shades of orange and shadow. In the fading light, the approaching riders become visible, dark shapes cresting the ridge above the canyon. 20, just as the scout had reported, maybe more behind them. They ride in formation, confident, unhurried. These aren't random drifters or opportunistic thieves. This group moves with military precision. Delshay steps forward, standing in open ground where he can be clearly seen. He holds no weapon. His hands remain at his sides, posture straight and unyielding. The message is clear. He isn't backing down, but he isn't attacking first either. The riders descend into the canyon, spreading into a loose semicircle that cuts off the main exit. Their leader dismounts, a tall man with a beard going gray, dressed in worn leather, carrying himself like someone accustomed to authority. Two others flank him, hands resting on holstered weapons. The bearded man speaks, his voice carrying across the space. "We're looking for 2 women, young, one injured. We have reason to believe they came through here." Delshay's expression remains impassive. "Many people come through here. These 2 were helped by a rancher, white man living alone north of here. We need to speak with him too." From his position behind the rocks, Clayton feels his blood run cold. They aren't even pretending this is about something else. They've connected him to the sisters. They know exactly what happened. Delshay doesn't move. "Why do you seek them?" The bearded man's jaw tightens. "That's between us and them. No concern of yours." "Everything that happens on this land is my concern." Delshay's voice remains level, but something dangerous edges beneath it. "You ride into my camp, armed, making demands. That makes it my concern." The tension thickens. Clayton watches the other riders shift in their saddles, hands moving closer to weapons. This is a breath away from violence. The bearded man takes a step forward. "We don't want trouble with you. Give us what we came for, and we'll leave peacefully." "And if I refuse?" The question hangs in the air like smoke. The bearded man's expression hardens. "Then we'll take what we came for. One way or another." Behind the rocks, Clayton's finger moves to the trigger. Every muscle in his body screams at him to stay hidden, to let Delshay handle this. But the truth is suffocating. These men are here because of him, because he'd made a choice that pulled others into danger. Before he can second-guess himself, Clayton stands. He steps out from behind the cover, rifle held loosely but ready, and walks toward Delshay's position. Every eye turns to him. The bearded man's expression shifts from annoyance to recognition. "That's him, the rancher." Clayton stops beside Delshay, close enough to show solidarity, but not so close he'd crowd the older man's authority. He looks directly at the bearded man. "I'm here. Let's talk." Delshay doesn't look at him, but his voice is quiet, meant only for Clayton. "This isn't your fight." Clayton keeps his eyes on the strangers. "You said I made myself a target. Seems like the target should face what's coming." For a moment, nothing moves. The canyon holds its breath. Then the bearded man smiles. It isn't a pleasant expression. "Brave. Stupid, but brave." He gestures to his men. "Bring him." 2 riders spur their horses forward, closing the distance fast. Delshay moves so quickly, Clayton barely sees it. One moment, he's standing still. The next, he's positioned himself between Clayton and the approaching riders, his hand raised in a gesture that stops them cold. "No one takes anyone from my camp without my permission." The bearded man's smile fades. "You're protecting him? A white man? After what his kind have done to yours?" Delshay's voice drops to something colder than Clayton has heard yet. "He gave my daughters his last horse. That makes him kin, and no one touches my kin." The words land like thunder. The bearded man's expression darkens. His hand moves toward his weapon, and everything explodes. The first shot cracks through the canyon like breaking bone. Clayton drops to the ground on instinct, dirt exploding inches from where he'd stood. Delshay moves with him, both hitting cover behind a supply cart as chaos erupts around them. Warriors return fire from elevated positions, their aim precise and devastating. 3 of the bearded man's riders fall in the first volley. The others scatter, seeking whatever shelter the canyon offers. Horses scream and bolt. Dust rises in choking clouds. Clayton presses his back against the cart, breathing hard. His rifle feels heavy in his hands. Beside him, Delshay remains perfectly calm, assessing the battlefield with the practiced eye of someone who's survived too many fights to panic during one more. "How many rounds do you have?" Delshay's voice cuts through the noise. Clayton checks. 12. Make them count." A rider charges toward their position, weapon raised. Clayton aims, steadies his breathing, and fires. The man jerks backward, tumbling from his saddle. The horse keeps running, disappearing into the smoke and confusion. Clayton's hand shakes. He'd hunted his whole life. Deer, small game, once a bear that had threatened livestock, but he'd never shot at a person. The weight of it settles in his chest like stone. "Focus." Delshay's voice yanks him back to the present. "Regret later. Survive now." 2 more riders break from cover, attempting to flank their position. Warriors intercept them before they can close the distance. The confrontation devolves into hand-to-hand combat. Brutal, efficient, over in seconds. The bearded man is nowhere visible. Clayton scans the chaos, trying to locate the leader. If they could stop him, maybe the others would retreat. Maybe this could end without more bloodshed. A figure moves near the camp's edge, creeping toward where the women and children had taken shelter. Not the bearded man, but one of his lieutenants, a younger man with a scar running down his cheek. He carries a knife, moving with the practiced stealth of someone trained to kill quietly. Clayton's stomach drops. There, heading for the shelters. Delshay sees it instantly. He whistles, a sharp, distinctive sound that cuts through the noise. 2 warriors detach from their positions, moving to intercept. But the scarred man is closer. He's reached the shelters first. Clayton doesn't think. He breaks from cover, running low and fast. His boots hammer against hard earth. The distance closes in what feels like hours, but couldn't have been more than seconds. The scarred man reaches the shelter's entrance, reaching for the hide covering. Clayton hits him like a battering ram. They crash to the ground together, rolling in the dirt. The knife flies from the man's grip, landing several feet away. Clayton scrambles for it, but the scarred man recovers faster than expected. A fist connects with Clayton's jaw, snapping his head back. Stars burst across his vision. They grapple in the dirt, neither able to gain advantage. The scarred man is younger, faster, but Clayton has worked a ranch for years. His strength comes from necessity, from hauling water and mending fences and doing whatever the land demanded. He locks his arms around the man's torso and squeezes until he feels ribs strain. The scarred man gasps, struggling to break free. Clayton holds on, pouring everything he has into maintaining the grip. His muscles burn, his vision blurs, but he doesn't let go. Maya appears above them, weapon in hand. She doesn't hesitate. One precise strike, and the scarred man goes limp. Clayton releases him, gasping for air. His entire body aches. Maya offers her hand, pulling him to his feet. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Both? Probably." Clayton retrieves his rifle, checking to make sure it hasn't been damaged in the struggle. The fighting has mostly stopped. Bodies lay scattered across the camp. More attackers than defenders, but the cost is still visible. Wounded warriors are being tended to. The remaining attackers have retreated beyond the canyon's edge. Regrouping. Delshay strides toward them, his expression grim. They'll come back. This was just the first attempt. Clayton wipes blood from his split lip. Who are they? Why are they so determined? Before Delshay can answer, a voice calls out from beyond the camp's perimeter. The bearded man, still alive, still in command. "Delshay, we need to talk." Delshay's jaw tightens. He moves toward the voice, and Clayton follows despite every instinct screaming to stay behind cover. The bearded man stands at the edge of rifle range, hands raised but weapons still holstered. His remaining men flank him. Fewer now, but still dangerous. "You've made your point," the bearded man calls, "but this doesn't end here. You know that." Delshay's voice carries across the distance, cold and clear. "Then tell me why. Why hunt my daughters? Why track this rancher? Who sent you?" The bearded man's expression twists into something almost like pity. "You really don't know, do you? Your daughters saw something they shouldn't have, something that powerful men want buried, and the rancher," he gestures toward Clayton, "he became a witness the moment he helped them." Clayton feels ice spread through his veins. What did they see? The bearded man smiles without humor. "Ask them, if they'll tell you. But know this, we're not the only ones looking, and the next group that comes won't be as forgiving." He turns to mount his horse, then pauses, looking back. "You bought yourself some time today. Use it wisely. Figure out what you're really protecting, because once you know the truth, you might wish you'd handed them over." The remaining riders disappear into the gathering darkness, leaving only dust and the promise of future violence. Delshay stands motionless, staring after them. Then he turns to Clayton, and in his eyes is something Clayton hasn't seen before. Fear. Delshay doesn't speak as they return to the camp center. The wounded are being treated, bodies of the fallen covered with blankets. The air smells of gunpowder and blood. Children peek from shelters, eyes wide with the kind of fear that will take years to fade. Clayton watches Delshay's face as they walk. The man who'd stood so confidently against 20 armed riders now carries tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that speaks of deeper worry than the fight itself. They stop outside the larger shelter where Maya had emerged earlier. Delshay turns to Clayton, and when he speaks, his voice is low enough that only they can hear. "What I'm about to show you changes everything. Once you know, there's no going back. No pretending you're just a man who helps some strangers. You understand?" Clayton meets his gaze. "I think I passed that point when I gave them the horse." Something that might be respect flickers across Delshay's features. He pulls back the hide covering and gestures inside. The shelter's interior is dimly lit by a single lamp. Kaya lies on a bedroll, her injured shoulder elevated and bandaged. She looks pale but alert, her dark eyes tracking them as they enter. Maya sits beside her sister, one hand resting protectively on Kaya's arm. Delshay kneels near his daughters, his presence filling the small space. "Tell him what you saw." Maya's jaw tightens. "Father, he needs to know. He's risked his life. He's earned the truth." For a long moment, no one speaks. Then Kaya shifts, wincing at the movement. When she speaks, her voice is quieter than Clayton expected, but steady. "We were hunting 2 days north of here, near the old canyon where the trading post used to stand." She pauses, gathering strength. "We heard voices. Men, so we stayed hidden, watched from the ridge above." Clayton waits, tension building in his chest. "There were 5 of them," Kaya continues, "well dressed. Not ranchers or trappers. They looked like government men. Official. They were meeting with someone, a man in expensive clothes who arrived with 2 guards." Maya picks up the story, her voice harder. "They were negotiating. The government men wanted land, a specific piece of territory that belongs to several tribes, including ours. Sacred ground, burial sites. The expensive man was offering to help them take it, for a price." Clayton feels his stomach turn. "How?" "By making it look like we'd violated treaty terms, staging attacks, blaming our people, giving them justification to move us off the land." Maya's hands curl into fists. "They discussed it openly. How many would need to die to make it convincing? Which settlements to hit first?" The implications crash over Clayton like a wave. Land seizure isn't new. He'd heard stories, seen families displaced, watched as promises got broken with bureaucratic efficiency. But this is different. This is premeditated, organized, murder disguised as policy. "They saw you," Clayton says, looking at Kaya. She nods. "One of the guards spotted us on the ridge. We ran. They followed. We've been running ever since." Delshay's voice is quiet but carries weight. "If they succeed, dozens of families will be forced from land we've held for generations. If we resist, they'll have justification for violence. If we comply, We lose everything anyway. Clayton's mind races. But if you have witnesses, if Maya and Kaya can testify to what they heard, who would believe them? Maya's voice is sharp. 2 women against government officials and wealthy businessmen? In what court would that testimony matter? The question hangs heavy because they all know the answer. None. Delshay stands, his frame blocking most of the lamplight. This is why they hunt so relentlessly. This is why more will come. Those men can't afford to leave witnesses, and now you're a witness too. You sheltered them. You helped them escape. That makes you dangerous to their plans. Clayton feels the full weight of his choice settling on his shoulders. He'd known giving the horse was risky, but he hadn't known it would pull him into something this large, this organized, this deadly. So, what do we do? His voice comes out rougher than intended. Delshay studies him for a long moment. You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect. You could leave, disappear, change your name, start somewhere else. Clayton thinks about his ranch, already dead, his life there, already over. He thinks about the moment he'd seen those 2 sisters, exhausted, bleeding, expecting nothing, and how something in him had broken at the sight. No, he says quietly, I gave them the horse. That makes them kin, right? That's what you told those riders. Delshay's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes. You understand what that means? You're choosing this fight, choosing to stand against people with resources and authority and the willingness to kill anyone who threatens them. Clayton meets his gaze steadily. I'm choosing not to run from people who want to murder families so they can steal land. Seems like a pretty clear choice to me. For the first time since they'd met, Delshay smiles. It's brief, barely visible in the dim light, but genuine. Then we plan. Because running won't save anyone, but the truth, properly delivered to the right people, might. Maya looks between them. Father, even if we find someone to listen, those men will come for us before we can reach anyone who matters. I know. That's why we need to move tonight, before they regroup, before they bring more men. Clayton's pulse quickens. Move where? Delshay turns to face him fully. There's a federal marshal in Durango, 2 days' ride from here. He's one of the few officials I've met who actually honors his word. If we can reach him, tell him what my daughter's witnessed, show him the evidence. What evidence? Clayton interrupts. Kaya reaches beneath her bedroll and pulls out a folded piece of paper, worn and stained, but intact. I grabbed this from the expensive man's saddlebag while they were distracted searching for us. She hands it to Clayton. He unfolds it carefully, holding it toward the lamp. It's a contract. Detailed, specific, outlining payments, timelines, and methods for removing Native families from designated territories. Signatures at the bottom, official seals, government stamps, names Clayton doesn't recognize but which clearly hold authority. His hands shake as he reads. This isn't speculation. This is proof. They'll kill everyone in this camp to get this back, Clayton says quietly. Delshay nods. Yes, which is why we leave in 1 hour. Small group, fast. You, me, my daughters, and 2 warriors I trust with my life. Everyone else scatters, hides, makes it impossible to track where we've gone. Delshay's voice is firm. It's the only way we get this evidence to the marshal. Or everyone dies anyway. Clayton looks at the contract again, at the signatures that condemn people to death for profit. He thinks about his empty ranch, his dead life, the choice he'd made that led to this moment. 1 hour, he agrees. Outside, the camp begins to move with urgent purpose. Families gathering belongings, preparing to disappear into the night. Warriors checking weapons, horses being readied. Clayton stands at the shelter's entrance, watching the organized chaos, and wonders if any of them will survive long enough to deliver the truth, and if anyone will care, even if they do. They ride through darkness, guided only by moonlight and Delshay's knowledge of terrain most men couldn't navigate in full daylight. 6 riders total, Delshay leading, Maya and Kaya sharing a horse, 2 warriors named Tahoe and Nikan flanking them. Clayton, bringing up the rear on his own horse, returned to him before they departed. The same horse he'd given away. the choice that started everything. They travel in silence, pushing the horses as hard as they dare without risking injury. Behind them, the camp scatters like seeds on wind, families disappearing into the landscape, making themselves invisible. Clayton wonders how many will survive if this plan fails. The contract remains tucked inside Delshay's shirt, wrapped in oiled cloth to protect it from the elements. That single piece of paper carries more weight than gold. It's evidence, proof, the difference between justice and massacre. Dawn breaks cold and gray. They've covered significant distance, but not enough. Tahoe, scouting ahead, returns with news that tightens everyone's spines. Riders, 8, maybe 10, moving fast. They're tracking us. Delshay's jaw sets. How far? An hour behind, maybe less if they don't stop. The group exchanges glances. Kaya's face has gone pale, her injured shoulder clearly causing pain despite the bandages. Maya's hand moves to the rifle strapped to her saddle. The warriors check their weapons without speaking. Clayton calculates distances in his head. 2 days' ride to the marshal, Delshay had said. They've covered maybe a third of that. If pursuers catch them now, outnumbered and in open territory, the contract won't matter. None of them will survive to deliver it. We need to buy time, Delshay says, his voice cutting through the tension. Split up. Make them choose. Maya shakes her head immediately. Father, no. Not negotiable. Delshay's tone leaves no room for argument. Tahoe, Nikan, you take my daughters north. Follow the river route. Safer, but longer. The rancher and I go east, draw the pursuit. Clayton understands instantly. The contract is with Delshay. If the pursuers want it badly enough, they'll follow whoever they think has it. And Delshay won't trust anyone else to carry something that important. They'll know you have it, Clayton says quietly. They'll come at you with everything. Delshay meets his eyes. Yes, which is why I need someone who can shoot straight and won't run when things turn bad. It isn't a question. It's a statement of trust that Clayton hadn't expected, but finds himself accepting without hesitation. The group splits within minutes. Tahoe and Nikan ride north with the sisters. Kaya casts one last look back before they disappear into a canyon passage. Delshay and Clayton turn east, toward rougher terrain, and the pursuers behind them. They ride hard for another hour before Delshay signals to stop. They've reached a narrow passage between two rock formations, defensible, with high ground on both sides, but limited escape routes. Here, Delshay says, dismounting. We make our stand. Clayton slides from his horse, legs protesting after hours of riding. We can't hold them off forever. Don't need forever. Just long enough for my daughters to get clear. Delshay pulls the contract from his shirt, looking at it for a long moment. Then he hands it to Clayton. If something happens to me, nothing's happening to you. If something happens, Delshay continues firmly, you get this to Marshal Garrett in Durango. You tell him everything. Make him listen. Clayton takes the contract, the weight of it settling in his hands like a burden he hadn't asked for but can't refuse. Why trust me with this? Delshay's expression softens slightly. You gave my daughters your last horse. You could have kept it, saved yourself, let them die. Instead, you chose their lives over your own survival. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Before Clayton can respond, the sound of approaching riders echoes through the passage. Too many horses, too close. They take positions on opposite sides of the passage, using rocks for cover. Clayton checks his rifle. 8 rounds left. He'll need to make every shot count. The riders appear at the passage entrance. Not 8 or 10. 15. More have joined the pursuit. The bearded man leads them, his face twisted with determination. He spots Delshay and Clayton immediately. His voice carries across the distance, sharp and unforgiving. This is your last chance. Give us the contract and you can walk away. Delshay stands, exposing himself fully. Come take it. The response is immediate. Rifles raised. Clayton sees it happening, sees the bearded man's hand drop, sees fingers tighten on triggers. Time fractures into individual moments. Clayton fires first, dropping the nearest rider. Delshay's shot follows, precise and deadly. But there are too many. Return fire explodes around them. Bullets ricochet off rock, kicking up dirt and stone fragments. Clayton ducks behind cover, reloading with shaking hands. His heart hammers against his ribs. This isn't like the camp. There's no reinforcement coming, no warriors to even the odds, just 2 men against 15. A bullet strikes near his head, close enough that he feels the displacement of air. He returns fire blindly, forcing the attackers to take cover. Across the passage, Delshay fights with calm efficiency, each shot deliberate. But even he can't hold forever. The bearded man calls out again, his voice thick with frustration. "You're dying for nothing. That contract won't change anything." Clayton presses his back against stone, breathing hard. The contract pressed against his chest, safely tucked away. He meets Delshay's eyes across the passage. The older man nods once, a gesture of understanding, of acceptance. They're going to die here, but the contract will survive. The truth will survive, and sometimes that's enough. Clayton raises his rifle, ready for whatever comes next. The sound of gunfire from behind the attackers changes everything. Clayton looks up from his cover, confusion mixing with desperate hope. The bearded man's group spins around, caught between 2 forces. New riders pour into the passage. A dozen men in federal uniforms, led by a man wearing a marshal's badge that catches the morning light. Marshal Garrett had found them first. The bearded man's crew scatters immediately, but there's nowhere to run. The passage offers no escape routes. Within minutes, federal officers have surrounded the remaining attackers, weapons drawn, orders shouted with the authority of law behind them. Clayton lowers his rifle, legs shaking so badly he has to lean against the rock to stay upright. Across the passage, Delshay emerges from cover, blood on his sleeve, but still standing. Marshal Garrett dismounts, his weathered face grim as he surveys the scene. He's older than Clayton expected. Gray hair, deep lines around sharp eyes that have seen too much to be easily fooled. He approaches Delshay first, recognition clear between them. "Got word you were heading my direction," Garrett says. "Figured if you were making a run for me specifically, the situation was bad." Delshay's response is quiet but steady. "Worse than bad. We have evidence of government conspiracy to seize tribal lands through manufactured violence." Garrett's expression hardens. He looks at his men securing the prisoners, then back to Delshay. "Show me." Clayton pulls the contract from inside his shirt, hands still trembling from adrenaline. He hands it to the marshal without a word. Garrett unfolds it carefully, reading in silence. With each line, his face grows darker. When he reaches the signatures at the bottom, he swears under his breath, a short, vicious curse that carries more weight than anger. These are federal officials, appointed men. He looks at Delshay. "You understand what this means? The investigation this will trigger? I understand it means families won't be slaughtered for profit," Delshay says firmly. "That's enough." Garrett nods slowly. He turns to Clayton, studying him with the same sharp assessment. "And you are?" "The rancher who gave his horse away and got pulled into all this." Clayton's voice comes out more bitter than he intended. Something shifts in Garrett's expression. Not quite sympathy, but understanding. The report mentioned a white man who helped Delshay's daughters escape. Said you gave them your last means of transportation, knowing it would cost you everything. Clayton says nothing. What is there to say? Garrett folds the contract carefully, tucking it into his coat. This evidence will be heard in a proper court with proper witnesses. The men who planned this will answer for it. He gestures to the captured bearded man, now being bound by federal officers. Including your friends here, who thought intimidation and murder were acceptable tools. The bearded man's face is ashen. Whatever authority he'd thought he possessed has evaporated the moment federal law arrived. He'd gone from hunter to prey in seconds. Over the next hour, Garrett's men secure the prisoners and take statements. Tahoe and Nikan arrive with Maya and Kaya, having circled back when they heard the gunfire stop. The reunion between Delshay and his daughters is quiet but profound. Hands clasped, foreheads touching, words spoken too softly for others to hear. Maya approaches Clayton while her father speaks with the marshal. Her expression is different now, softer. The suspicion that had marked their first interactions has transformed into something else. My father wants you to come back with us, to the new camp, wherever we settle. Clayton looks at her, surprised. I'm not. I don't belong with your people. You gave us your last horse, Maya says steadily. That makes you kin. Father's words, not mine, but I agree with them. She pauses. You have nowhere else to go. Your ranch is gone. You're wanted by the same people who wanted us dead. Coming with us isn't charity. It's family taking care of family. The word sticks in Clayton's throat. Family. He'd been alone for so long, he'd forgotten what that felt like. Delshay joins them, his wounded arm now bandaged. He extends his hand. Not a handshake, a clasp of forearms, warrior to warrior. You gave my daughters your last horse when you had every reason not to. You stood beside me when you could have run. You protected what mattered when it would have been easier to let it burn. His grip tightens. That debt can't be repaid, but it can be honored. You have a place with us for as long as you want it. Clayton feels something break loose in his chest, a knot he'd carried since the winter killed his cattle, since he'd stopped believing in anything beyond survival. I'd be honored, he manages. Marshal Garrett approaches, the contract secure in his possession. This will take time. Investigations, trials, appeals, but justice will be served. You have my word. He looks directly at Clayton. What you did, giving up everything for strangers, that took courage most men don't have. The territory needs more people like you. 3 months later, Clayton helps construct a shelter in the new camp. Located on protected land far from the conspiracy's reach, nestled in the mountains just outside Durango. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, adapt easily to different construction methods. Children run past, laughing. Elders share stories by fires. Life continues, resilient and unbroken. Maya brings him food as the sun sets, sitting beside him in comfortable silence. Kaya's shoulder has healed. The trials have begun in distant courts. The contract's evidence has proven irrefutable. And every evening, Clayton walks to where the horses are kept, finding the one he'd given away and gotten back. He runs his hand along its neck, remembering the moment he'd made a choice that changed everything. He'd given his last horse to 2 sisters at sunset. At dawn, their father had come with 100 warriors, and Clayton Reed had found something he'd thought was lost forever. a reason to keep going, a place to belong, a family that chose him as surely as he'd chosen them. Sometimes the things you give away come back transformed into exactly what you needed all along. If you enjoyed this story of courage and honor on the frontier, click that subscribe button now. We have dozens more tales of unlikely heroes, dangerous choices, and life-changing decisions waiting for you. Ready for another unforgettable story? Click the video on your screen right now to watch a tale of survival and justice that will stay with you long after it ends. Don't miss it.